In the world of firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. That's why for over 2 decades, first responders nationwide have trusted the Fire Store as their go-to source for essential equipment, apparel, and accessories. Visit thefirestore.com online or in-store today. The Fire Store.
Welcome back to Fire Apparatus Emergency Equipment Podcast, the Apparatus Workshop. This is Nick Wilbur here with Win Slauch as always, and we have a new/returning guest, Tom Shan, one of the greats in the apparatus and specking industry. I'll let Tom give a little background about himself and bring himself in.
Thanks. Appreciate the invitation from Nick and Win. So my background started in the fire service in 1970 when open cab apparatus meant it didn't have a roof. And if you had doors, there wasn't any such thing as a seatbelt. Spent 32 years in the apparatus industry, working in different sales and engineering management positions. Worked for a good number of years with Nick's dad, Mike Wilbur. And a good number of years ago, we started emergency vehicle response by doing apparatus specification work, assisting fire departments with fleet reviews, aerial needs assessments, and kind of all things. Finished up my career last year with a 12-year stint with the Navy and the Marine Corps, doing their apparatus specifications. Was part of the team that did the pre-construction conference and the final inspection, as well as, in a few cases, some of the actual in-service training on the units at the different installations. So again, Nick and Win, thanks again for the invitation, and look forward for our discussions today.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for coming on. And today this was a topic that that Tom actually brought up to us, and I think it was a great one. Parade ready versus response ready. I think there's that's kind of a very broad statement that can cover a lot of stuff. And I think with the apparatus industry today, kind of where we're at, what's going on, there's a lot to talk about. And I think really what we're going to hone in on is that final inspection process to an extent, and kind of what we need to look for, what we're looking out for, and what we really need to see in a rig and kind of feel and know about a rig before we get ready to press that thing in service. So I think the first thing when we're going out and we're doing a final inspection, if you have done it and it's been a while, or if you've never done it before, I'll throw this question to Win first and kind of just get the conversation started. What do we expect with a final inspection? Or what should you expect with a final inspection in today's market?
I think in today's market, a final inspection it's your last chance to make sure that what you spent a year and a half trying to put on paper, and then receive bids for, and then waited to last, at this point, 3.5 to 4 years for, is built correctly, and it's built to your specifications. I think a lot of people, forget the fact that this is the last chance that you have the ability to make it right before it falls on you. And this isn't about the steak dinner or whatever special thing that they have. This is about work. And, most final inspections today, they're trying to move, from what I've seen, is they want to move stuff off of their show floor. And they don't want to schedule a proper amount of time. If you don't request it, if you're unsure, they'll give you a day to do a pump, or maybe 2 days for a ladder truck. And quite frankly, in order to do everything, that just isn't enough, especially when you're not familiar with how you're going to do that. If you've never done a final inspection for, you might not be sure how to read the paperwork that you're going to go over, or go through the bid or the bid packet or component list, which will just increase the amount of time that you have. So, again, at the final inspection, this is your last chance to make sure that it's right before it becomes your problem. Obviously there's warranty issues and things like that you'll be able to get corrected. But for the most part, this is the last time that you have the ability to make it right.
How about you, Tom? What do you think?
Yeah, Win, some really good points. I guess to go to Nick's intro to saying whether you have done one recently, which is if you have, you maybe have a little bit of experience as to what the process is like today compared to if the last time you bought a rig was 4 or 5 years ago. Part of that, I think, is you need, if you haven't done one, there's no one on your committee that has any degree of experience beyond hopefully you have a savvy sales representative that knows the product inside and out, but you can't, honestly, you can't always count on that. And in some cases, that gentleman may have been representing the product for a fairly short period of time and just doesn't have the internal connections within the factory if you happen to find something. So part of that is that you need to reach out and talk to another fire department. Don't be embarrassed. If you're in a small little one-station volunteer department, don't be embarrassed by reaching out to somebody whom you trust or maybe have checked out on the internet that's managing a fleet, and give them a shout and say, hey, how does your process work? I've looked at your rigs, maybe saw one at a show. They seem to come out really, really well. What's your experience, and how did you get there? Again, every manufacturer has a different process of how it goes. So part of that I think goes back, if you hadn't had the discussion previously, even though there may be a lot of time elapsed between the pre-construction conference and when the final inspection gets scheduled, is to have those discussions with your salesperson at the pre-construction conference, which hopefully is happening at the facility where you're building the rig, and finding out, just say, hey, if we didn't raise the question, what is your typical final inspection? How do you do it? How's the factory? What's the factory's expectations? And for example, 2 small things that I think all 3 of us would agree to, pretty important. One was that if the unit has any kind of pump on it, you want to be able to go inside, into their pump facility or outside, whatever, and at some point duplicate a miniature version, of the UL test, of the third-party testing. And at some point you would want to validate and verify the weight of the unit, at least with a full tank of fuel and your, foam tank and water tank filled. And in some cases, the dealer may initially push back and say, well, hey, we normally don't do that. Well, those are in Tom Shan's world, those are 2 absolutes. All right. If you can't validate and verify, even if they tell you, because the standard response is going to be, well, fill in the blank. UL, the third-party testing company, was just here last week and tested the pump, and we can provide you the PDF. I've been through those experiences and then found, well, when they do the third-party testing, they're typically going to use the side pump panel discharges. If you've got discharges out the back, which are pretty common in a lot of departments, running, multiple 2.5s off the back or a big line up on the front bumper, other than those lines being hydrostatically tested, water's never flowed through any of those lines. So if you're running your attack lines off the back and you want to validate what the friction loss is between the pump discharge pressure and an inline gauge at the back, those are the kinds of things you want to do. And you, the customer, need to set the stage. It's unlike if you've bought a new vehicle, at a car dealership, that they're there, and Win kind of alluded to this. They want the car off the lot with your certified check from the bank. The only thing that's different buying a fire truck is, in most cases, they don't expect you to pay for it when you're there at the final inspection. But your job is to work in concert with your salesperson and the factory. And for example, one of the most recent, it was a 2-pumper order for rigs. And early on, we told the salesperson, we don't care when, we realize that during the production time, even if you run a single shift from 6 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you may be pump testing rigs for other people. If we need to get in there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not a problem. We had one case where the salesperson says, well, our dinner reservations are at 5:30. I don't need to eat at 5:30. We need to make sure we can get the inspection done. And as Win alluded to, 1.5 days, absolute minimum on a pumper to cover everything. And that doesn't mean you're flying out on day one and you're coming home on day 2. If your vendor is close enough that you can drive, that's a bonus. But if it takes you half a day to get to the factory where they're building the rig, you just can't do a good quality inspection on a unit, in 6 hours one day and 4 hours the next, and think that you're going to get everything. Because the factories have so much work, and this is not a slam on anybody, this is industry wide. So if you have a particular brand favorite, we're not knocking them saying, hey, this guy's better than the other guy. Everybody's goal is to get X number of units, whatever that numeric is, out the door every 30 days. And it's more critical at the end if you can key in on when the company's financial year runs. All right. I can guarantee you, if you're getting a rig that's built in the fourth quarter, it's just a matter of fact. And again, we're not slamming anybody. Those rigs in the fourth quarter are going to be rocking and rolling to get out the door, and particularly if it's something at the end of the month. So if you're doing a final inspection after the 20th or 22nd of the month, you better believe that there's a lot of pressure internally from a financial standpoint to move that rig out and get it delivered out to the dealership, where then hopefully the rest of the punch list will be worked off of if it wasn't done successfully at the factory. But a couple of manufacturers are moving towards doing third-party warranty. It's kind of like Car Shield. So they want to get out of the warranty business. So to go to Win's point, when we say it's your last opportunity, it doesn't mean that they're going to drop you, on Monday morning after the prom date on Saturday. But the degree of difficulty and the amount of horsepower that you're going to have to put to enact the warranty, it is much more important to do a thorough final inspection, go over the punch list, have everybody understand what items you've identified, how the factory is going to resolve those. And unfortunately, again, more often than not, what happens, the factory works off some of the punch list items, and when it comes time to ship the rig, they ship it to the dealer, and you go to look at the rig at the dealer, a week after the committee just came back, and you've got your hard copy of the punch list, and you'll find out there's, any number of things that still weren't corrected. And now it's the dealer's responsibility to do that, which ultimately is holding you, the department, up to be able to get the unit upfitted, get your people trained, and get the rig in service. Back in the good old days, whenever whatever that time frame is that you want to think, it was pretty standard that within 3 to 4 weeks after you did your final inspection, if you had a radio shop and your upfitting people lined up, you'd have the rig ready for the folks to be trained. I've talked to people where the rigs have been bouncing back and forth, and it's 4 months, 5 months, 6 months before they're able to get the rig in service, which in some cases then just makes managing the whole fleet more difficult, because the old reserve rig that's approaching 22 years of age that you thought was going to get out of the fleet, you're still running that on a daily basis because the new rig's either in your shop in the fire department or bouncing around back and forth between the dealer and some other outside vendor trying to get the punch list items resolved. So the rig's bulletproof when you go to put it in service, and you're not going to have to yank it out, on the second shift after you put the new engine online.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to kind of build on there, and I think we'll touch on this one subject in a little bit, but the things that you expect, so that pump tests, the weighing of the apparatus with sandbags on it to simulate, the equipment layouts, if that stuff is not put into your initial specification, your contract, then the chances of you getting it done are they kind of go down the hill a little bit. You might not have the ability to go to the pump shack because you didn't request that up front. I've had a company request that the vehicle be weighed with sandbags or driven actually with sandbags on it, so that they have the weight of the proposed or specified what they requested on the fire truck, and the manufacturer has said, no, we don't do that, which we know is not true. It's just that they don't want to do that. They have the sandbags, they have the ability. It's just, again, it's time that they don't want to do.
Yeah. Agreed. And this kind of goes back to old school, quick 30 seconds. Nick, you can cut me off. Get me on the timer, right? It goes back to writing a spec. If you bought the unit, God bless you, through a nationally recognized consortium, Sourcewell or HGAC, you were reliant upon the manufacturer to supply you their spec with their standard verbiage. So at the very least, if you did not write boilerplate, which outlined, here's the game plan, here's how this process is going to go work in the Nick Wilbur VFD, and you're relying upon the manufacturer to think that they can read your mind, that needs to get developed up front. So if you didn't write your at least boilerplate, you probably needed to get help doing that. If you didn't write a spec, then you need to have that conversation early on with your salesperson. Again, we understand everybody is in business ultimately to go make money and build a certain number of units. One of my good friends came out with a comment a while back saying, you want your manufacturer to be financially healthy. Understood. Because when you have warranty issues or you have other aftermarket things, you want the manufacturer to step up. Whether you're buying one rig or you just bought 10 of them, you want the manufacturer to be responsive to you. But if you don't let your wishes be known early on, there's two manufacturers in the United States that will do what Win just said. They'll weigh the rig. If you had an aerial device, you want to see water flow through the aerial device, yeah, they'll do that. You want to see the rig up on lifts, no problem, we'll do that. You want to have the rig pump tested, that's fine. But each of those items is chargeable, and it's a line item in their spec. They don't do it for free. So you can't wait till you get there on day one of your final inspection. Everybody's sipping their coffee. They've done the 360 walk around for 45 minutes and then the proverbial kick the tires. And you're like, okay, guys, now it's time to break out the spec, the component list. Let's get to work. That's not the time to then turn to your salesperson. What time are we going to the pump house? He needed to know that early on. And those baseline things, which are vitally important, again, understand the manufacturer is going to say, oh, don't worry, that's a requirement of NFPA. I think we've all had experiences of doing road test or pump test or aerial operational test on something where the vendor said, oh yeah, it's all been certified. They, quote, so-and-so was here last week and everything's great. And even if they can provide the paperwork, they're not looking, for the kinds of things that we're looking for. The third-party testing company on an aerial, they're not testing the envelope control, all right, to look to dial the unit in to make sure that we can maximize the scrub area on a rig. They're looking at other stuff. That's their job. Our job is to go look at all that stuff. And if you wait until the rig post-delivery and is sitting on the ramp of your station, and if, God forbid, you didn't tell the vendor the weight of your equipment that you're going to put in there, and let's assume for the moment it's some kind of aerial quint, all right, and the weight of your equipment's 3,200 pounds, and the manufacturer only allocated the NFPA minimum of 2,500 for that device, any problems you have henceforth in terms of overweight, over-axled on springs, suspension, tires, axles, anything, that's now on you, the customer, and that gets to be really, really expensive.
And to go back or a little bit further on the pump test and why those things are important. I just did a final inspection a couple of weeks ago, and the pump test wasn't scheduled. I don't even know if this manufacturer had the ability to do a pump test. I'm not sure exactly where they did it. I'm sure there's somewhere there, but we had water in the pump, and of course we wanted to at least make sure that all the discharges worked properly and were hooked to the right discharge outlet. So, throttle it up a little bit, and because this was a rear inlet, we had checked the rest of them just with head pressure. We throttled up a little bit on this last one, and the adapter for the rear discharge flew off 65 feet behind us. Luckily, the salesman was sitting 75 feet back, so he didn't get hit, but he came really close to getting hit with it. And what we came to find out is that they put a national standard thread on a national pipe thread outlet. And so it wasn't tight. And when it was pressurized, it went flying off behind us. So, something as simple as, like Tom said, oh yeah, we have the paperwork on this. This is done. It's been verified and is good to go. Well, we added a discharge outlet or a reducer to it, and now we have an issue that is not correct. So, again, it's really, really important that you are specifying the tests that you want to see witnessed at the final, and making sure that gets done. And another thing, just to kind of add to this whole what to expect, is I'm going out in 2 weeks to do a final, and the customer said, "Hey, can you tell us what we need to do to prepare ourselves?" And that's the first time I've ever heard that. What do we need to do to prepare ourselves for this? Well, you want to go back and read your spec. You want to make sure that you understand everything that you put in this fire truck 2 years ago, and understand how you're going to read the spec, what it says, so that when we get out there, we can minimize the questions that we have to ask, and we can get through this in a timely fashion, or in a limited amount of time we actually have to perform the inspection. So I think that was a really good question. Again, that's really the first time I've kind of heard that. Hey, what do we need to do to prepare for this? So, you're going to do a final inspection with a squared away company when you're getting that question.
Yeah, good point, Nick. I think one of the things in terms of preparation, at least one person on the committee needs to come out with a old school 3-ring binder, hard copy of the specs, all right, and all of the associated correspondence and the blueprints, all right? So you've got a reference point. People aren't trying to pull stuff up on their smartphones or running back and forth every 35 seconds when they find something, and they're scratching their head saying, "Boy, I don't remember saying that." Again, it's really, really important now, because the amount of lead time between when the pre-construction conference occurred and when you're going out for the final inspection now is years. It's not just months. All right. So that's one thing. The other thing is to just key off and tell the salesperson, if you're going out with 4 other people, so there's 5 on the committee. All right. So maybe one person's got the binder. Tell the salesperson, when we get there, I want to have whatever document you're going to use. Hopefully it's at least one copy of the long verbiage spec, whether you call it the component list or the stripper, one copy of that, and 11 by 17 print, one for each person in the group. All right. Because if you've got multiple people going out there, I've had reasonable success with ahead of time. You try to team people up, two people to a team, and they each take a portion of the component list or spec and kind of key in on that, as well as then tell the salesperson, you want to have a hard copy of all of the change orders, because again, of the amount of lead time between contract to pre-construction to final inspection. One person somewhere along the line, the person that's savvy enough to know that they can read the verbiage and then go to the rig to go validate that, to make sure that all of those change orders were actually incorporated and done on the vehicle. Because again, of the backlog in the industry, I don't think of the last 5 finals that I've done, I haven't had one where what the factory presented as the final version of the production spec was not keyed in to incorporate all of the change orders. All right. And then depending upon how those change orders were noted in the production spec, more often than not, you'll see a little S over in the left-hand column, and then the someone in the engineering group or within the factory will then make a bolt. If we were describing, for example, a 2.5-inch rear discharge, which seems to be pretty mundane, but you've got 2 left and 1 right, but there was some specific verbiage in there of the right side 2.5-inch discharge, how many inches from the right side it was supposed to be located, or centered under hose bed, whatever. Those kinds of details get put in there, because there's been numerous times where visually what the blueprint shows and what the verbiage reads, there's differentiations between those two. So then that leaves people scratching their head. And if it's something dimensionally, you typically would think, well, the blueprint's got to be correct. However, if you look at most of the blueprints, somewhere along the line, there's a little caveat that'll say, certain dimensions, plus or minus 2 inches. Now, plus or minus 2 inches can make a heck of a difference if you're talking about an overall length or an overall height issue. All right. And then at that point, those are some of the key dimensions. I don't know necessarily, unless you don't trust your vendor, that you need to go in and tape measure each compartment. All right. But certain critical dimensions, the wheelbase, front bumper extension, rear overhang, all the height, step surfaces, overall height and overall length, those things, you have to actually physically measure them. Even though the NFPA says there's going to be a little tag in there, I can tell you at least half the time when the NFPA guy does his measurement or what he pulls it off, and then the little tag is in there saying here's the height of the rig. You go to tape it and find out now that's off by 3 inches. I've had that more often than not. So you can't even go sometimes by the labeling that's there and assuming that the labeling syncs up with what you're actually going to find.
To build off of that too, with some of the other inspections, you talk about pump. Obviously, I'm going to talk about ladder trucks because that's obviously the better part of this entire conversation. But when we're dialed in ladder trucks, right? Like you mentioned, the envelope controls. We've seen as far as 3 feet away where collision avoidance or some computer systems limiting your ability to get down somewhere. So I think that's huge that you go out there, and when you're asking for a technician to be out there to adjust it. This isn't, everyone's like, oh, well, just tell them to put it within 6 inches. Well, with how custom these fire trucks are, it's just this number, this random generated number in this computer system that says, hey, stop here. That's it. There's no like, hey, 6 inches from the cab shows up on this computer system as 6 inches from the cab. It just shows up as this GPS coordinate location, right? So if you don't have the person out there hands-on working with the programming when you're doing it, that's going to be an issue. You can't just say, hey, get it within 6 inches. You want to make sure the guy's on the computer right there with you and saying, this is exactly where I want it to be, and they can set the program for it. The other thing with water, you're looking at the pump. The other thing, don't forget about the tank, right? We want a 650-gallon tank, 700-gallon tank, 500-gallon tank, 750, whatever that water tank is. And if you get into tankers, it's more, even more important. When we fill that water tank up, we want to make sure we weigh it empty with no water, full with water, and then empty the water out and weigh it again. We want to make sure those weights of empty with no water and then empty after filling it and emptying it with water are pretty similar, right? Because we can have sumps in there where we're missing 100, 200, 300 gallons of water. You could buy a 3,000-gallon tanker, and when you fill it and empty it, you could still have 200, 300, 400 gallons of water in there. Well, guess what? Now you have a 2,600-gallon tanker instead of a 3,000. And that goes back to the intent, right? When you're speccing something, there's a mission and there's an intent behind it. And the final inspection is when you check that. When you check what your intent of the vehicle is and if it works that way. We've done things in Arlington. I know we did things in College Park where we had an intention to do X, Y, Z. You get to final inspection, and that the best Tom Sham quote, I say it all the time, any fire truck will fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, right? Doesn't mean it's going to work for you or fit in your firehouse. Well, that's a huge thing. You go out there and you're like, oh, wow, this is bigger than I thought. This is higher to reach than I thought in a compartment. This is, this is not going to work because the way we wanted to mount this equipment, there's not enough room in this compartment. That's where you figure this stuff out, and you're at the factory now. They can fix it. Now it's going to cost you a lot of money, but if you bring it home to the firehouse and back it in, that's going to cost you way more money, way more downtime, and honestly, you might even have to send it back to the factory if it's a big fix. So again, the intent of operations, we go back to parade ready versus operational ready. There's a lot of people that go out there and check the paint, put all those, the tape on the sides of the fire truck and worry about the scratches. At the end of the day, we're going to go out and we're going to take it down the first street in Arlington and we're going to rake it along a tree or something that's not trimmed. That's not a big deal, right? Obviously, that's an important thing. We paid a lot of money for it. But I'm worried about operationally, can my equipment that I thought was going to fit in this compartment fit in there? Let's take those measurements. Let's make sure those things are squared away. Hey, the ladders we put on the side of this fire truck that we side stack, can I get those off operationally? If not, how can we fix that, right? Because that's something that when we get back to the firehouse, Yeah, you're going to be sent out there with a couple torches and some saws trying to cut into the body of a fire truck to fit ladders if they don't work, right? And that's not practical. That's not going to happen. So I think that's a lot of stuff that some people kind of miss when they see that big red fire truck with the lights on there. They don't really think about what the intent of that fire truck was and the mission of the vehicle.
No, excellent point. What you're as a member of your department's apparatus committee, what your expectation is for a final inspection, understandably, may be very different than what the factory expectations are. So here's a good ground ladder story. All right, help out the brother truckies. All right, the last 2 ladder truck final inspections that I've been at with two different manufacturers, and they were insistent that the vehicle, you need. These were in large municipal city fleet departments. You need to be here this week. The rig is ready for final inspection. And in one case, we get there, and after doing the little quick 360 walk around, yours truly opens up the rear roll up door, and magically there's no ground ladders in any of the ladder banking. All right, so that's a little strange. So initially, our handler, the local representative for the factory, says, I'm pretty sure the ground ladders are here somewhere. So they split 2 people off from the committee, and they go out with this gentleman forming an old Western-style posse. All right, they put on the 6-shooters and the cowboy hats, and we send a posse out to go look for the ground ladders. Well, they come back about 45 minutes later. They've checked every nook and cranny. All right. Can't find the ground ladders, make a few phone calls, and the handler comes back and says, well, and I felt bad for him because he knew what was about to happen. He blames it, says, well, purchasing ordered the ground ladders too late in the process. So there's no ground ladders for the rig here. And this rig was going to have, among other things, a 45-foot 3-section banger. So kind of like, somebody telling you, well, UL was just here last week to do the pump test. And when you go out, you pull the pull handle for discharge number 2, and the gauge on discharge number 3 reads. It says, okay, well, pretty clear that the UL wasn't looking for that. I said, well, when are they going to be here? Now, this is the last week of February. He says, well, the ground ladders are due to ship from the manufacturer the 3rd week of June. Right. With that, the deputy chief of the department he's like, why the hell are we here? All right. If you're going to inspect a ladder truck for a final inspection, and the comment from the manufacturer was, well, no big deal. We'll just redirect the shipment and we'll ship them to you. Well, what happens then when things don't work? So lo and behold, we find a customer's ladder truck, different make, different configuration, and it's got ground ladders on it. So we pull the customer's ladder truck out, back it up to the back of this tractor drawn, and we take all the ground ladders off the tractor drawn because they were the same make and length, and we go to try to make them fit within the ladder bays and find out that 2 of the ladder bays won't accept the ladders that they were supposed to per the print and the specs. Not going to work. Now you got to reconfigure that. So that was like a minor victory for us. It's like we figured out the workaround, but a final inspection on a ladder truck, you would hope your ground ladders are going to be there. You would hope that all of the testing, if it's got a pump, if it's got an aerial device, a number of years ago on a Navy project, we're there to do a final inspection again at the absolute insistence of the manufacturer. And I'm up with our EVT mechanic in the platform. And a couple of things just didn't seem right. I mean, just the operation, the rotation was kind of hesitant, the chattering, extension and retraction weren't very smooth. So we kind of stopped what we were doing, got down, and then said, hey, can we see the certification, the paperwork on this? They go, oh, that's going to be in 2 weeks. Testing company hasn't been here yet. Well, if the testing company hasn't been there yet, now our job is now compounded by the fact that we're now acting basically as your QA agency here, quality assurance. our job as the fire department to be sure to go to Wynn's point to make sure that everything we specified, A, is there. If it's something that's supposed to function, work, up, down, in, out, whatever, flow, not flow, that all of these different things work. Again, not damning the industry, but they're assembling all of this stuff. And with the increased emphasis to move stuff every 30 days, every quarter, certainly at the end of their fiscal year, that the testing company may or may not have been there. And even if the testing company was there, like we were talking about the pump test, they're not flowing water through every discharge. If you've got a deck gun or a wagon pipe, that water's never flown through that. That thing was hydrostatically tested. All right. So on one of the things where we're doing individual flow tests off the rear discharges, we're kind of cleaning them out and find out there's all kinds of pipe dope and pipe tape that are all running out the back. Well, if you had never run through that and you happen to be a department that didn't believe in smoothbore nozzles and had fog nozzles, the first time you put an attack line on that, it's going to all jam up with all that pipe dope and tape and stuff. So it's the final inspection, the importance of the final is at an all-time high with respect to the department's responsibility, not only to the people that bought the rig for you, your taxpayers, however it was funded. Thank the people if you're still doing car washes for that. You're relying upon to make sure that everything is there, it works, and that's why we talked about, parade ready. If the rig sitting next to me in a final inspection bay looks like the thing's got the measles, and everybody is all looking at that, and I've seen people, do it with magnifying glasses, looking at the graphics and the stuff, and nobody's yet gotten on a creeper to go underneath to look to see how everything looks on the underside. God bless you. You're a parade-ready fire department. I'm glad you ain't coming to my house, right? I want the operationally ready fire department with their reasonably new rig to show up to make sure that everything is there, including there's been numerous discussions talking about, you can go down a whole rabbit hole of just talking about the age of tires. All right. If the chassis is sat around, had recently had one, the chassis had been built for 3 years. When they went for the final inspection, they were going on year 4 that the tires were there. Well, it doesn't do much when the NFPA standard is saying it's got to be replaced at the 7-year mark. So they negotiated something with the vendor to say that at the 7-year mark, the vendor's going to replace all the tires. There are legitimate reasons why ground ladders, are going to be late. You maybe can't get the brand or size or tread pattern of tire, but all of those things, you need to have good lines of communication along the way, even though it can be 2.5 or 3 years between pre-construction and final. After you sign off the change orders from pre-construction, in the past, that generally meant you were good to go. That was the way they were going to build it. Now there'd be a lot of times there's component changes or model changes, particularly when you get into warning lights. I mean, if you got a 4-year lead time on your tandem axle aerial device, there's a good chance that probably 50% of the models of the warning lights that you specified that are probably standard with what you're running, all that stuff's going to change because the technology is going to change.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's there's a ton of stuff there, and I just look, and a couple of times I've been out there doing final inspections, and you get out there, and there's always a department on the inspection floor there. You get out there, you're out there for an hour or two, you look left, look right, and then they're gone, and you're like, where did they go? Like, oh yeah, they went out for lunch. They hit the bar. It's like, well, I guess once the lights turned on and they got their Facebook and Instagram updated, then here we are. We're kind of ready to go. I think going back to Wynn's point before, one thing that's huge here, I want to hit on and hit on pretty hard, because you brought it up with the tires, things like that, and we talked about the boilerplate and how important that is, how paramount that is, because at the end of the day, if there's a dispute, if there's an issue, what does the customer have as rights? What can the customer ask for? What if there's a disagreement? What do they go back to? I want to kind of hit on those points. And I know, we talked about ground ladders and not being in there and stuff like that. I mean, that's an awesome story to capture. Like, we as a customer, when we come in there, we have to have expectations. The communication before obviously has to be in there, but at the end of the day, we show up and something's not right. You got to ask the questions. Like you said before, there's no NFPA police. There's nobody coming in behind to lock up a manufacturer or salesperson for not following what the NFPA says. Should they? Absolutely. Is it the right thing to do? Absolutely. Is it ignorance? Is it just not doing it? Is it time? Whatever, right? There's all these reasons that could be happening, but we're seeing people miss the mark on the NFPA. And so I think if we do run into an issue, if there is something going on, how do we resolve that? And what can we do today if we're starting a fire truck spec today to help protect ourselves and set the stage for that final inspection?
I think there's kind of two things there. And the first one is definitely the boilerplate. If you, like Tom said earlier, if you buy off of a consortium, or you call your preferred manufacturer and say, hey, give me a quote, or, give me, a spec, then you're going to get the boilerplate that is favorable to the manufacturer and the dealer. And you are not going to have a whole lot of ability to hold them accountable for anything outside of really the warranty and what is expected for NFPA. So if you don't take the time and you don't understand what a boilerplate is, and you don't take the time to put verbiage in the boilerplate that changes the favor into yours, then you have very little. You don't really have a leg to stand on when you go in there and there's something wrong. So again, it's important that you specify exactly what you expect, exactly what you want out of the final inspection, out of, even like Tom said, we're going to a third-party warranty. But if you write in the specification that, hey, you as the dealer or the manufacturer are responsible for everything on this truck for the first year, then that takes that burden off of you and puts it back onto the manufacturer and the dealer to ensure that stuff's right. Now, they're going to come back and say, well, we can't warranty or ensure that this light's going to work, or I understand that you aren't going to do it, but what I don't want to have to deal with it. When I call you and say my light's not working on my brand new fire truck, it's your problem. I want you to deal with it. I want you to deal with that manufacturer and get the warranty covered. And that's what I'm requesting for in this, in this boilerplate. And, hopefully they agree to that and you sign off on it. Again, it's a contract negotiation at that point all the way through for both you and the dealer, and you have to come to a mutual understanding about what you're going to do there.
I think sole source manufacturers, remember we got this question, we heard it not too long ago. There was a non-sole source manufacturer where cabin chassis was one, body was another, pump was another, and they asked us in this class, like, hey, what do I do to get them to take care of it? And if you go back and they didn't have a favorable boilerplate, they had to call 16 different people. Well, hey, this wire broke. Well, it's a cabin chassis thing over here, but then this wire goes over here. Now it's a body thing. Now it's and they were just on the phone all the time dealing with 16 different people trying to get the fire truck fixed. And it was just these horror stories that we hear that go to exactly what you were saying with that. Like, you are in charge of it all. Sole source, not sole source, but all of that. You are the one in charge.
Right. And I think the other thing, especially that's kind of down the road, right? But at final inspection, the other thing that, and this can be hard. It all depends on how many fire trucks you buy, but your relationship with your dealer or your salesman can go a long way in you getting things corrected on the factory floor, or them pushing, in your favor. Say, hey, this is really what this was supposed to be. This is a little bit off. What can we do, to kind of fix that? I think that those are the two, kind of important things. And I've seen both sides of it, where you have a salesman who is willing to work for you as a fire department and will push and make changes and get things done. And then I've also done a final inspection where the salesman doesn't even sell for that brand of fire truck anymore, but he is only there because he was a salesman when the truck was sold. So he has absolutely no there's nothing coming back from the factory for that guy. He's got no, there's no favor being given to him. There's nothing that he's going to say that is going to help you. So again, you really have to take care of yourselves and write that out in that boilerplate, and make sure that it is favorable to you, and that you are going to get what you expect out of that final inspection.
Yeah, Win, that's an excellent point. Even within this, representing the same manufacturer but different salespeople from different geographic parts of the country. I've had the pleasure of working with one gentleman that you mentioned, where he's he can't go to bat for you 100%, but he knows what your expectations are and will act on your behalf as an intermediary. And with that same manufacturer, I've done final inspections where, when I identified that I had done a bunch of work on military projects there, where they require that you take a picture of each issue and then enter it into their system, the salesperson says, you take it. So when you go to do call it the wrap up or the walk around, where they bring the people in, the Mr. and Mrs. Fix-It people who are going to work off your punch list, there's times where you've had, I'll always defer to the salesperson, and there's times that the salesperson, he'll lead the walk around and go through the punch list and act again as to, well, here's the issue. Really wasn't what we expected. There's, been a change between and this another whole item. What was standard? What did that item cover when you signed the contract versus now we're 3 or 4 years down the road? Well, now this is the new standard that we're doing, and the person can be of great benefit. And there's other times that, again, that same in a venue, the salesperson is just standing in the back, say, "Hey, Tom, you type the stuff, you read through it." I'm like, I'm acting here at on behalf of the fire department. All right. And it's not that it can't all be one, can't be 100% one way and 0% the other, or vice versa. There has to be a little bit of give and take. But certainly, as compared to even 5 years ago, all right, a final inspection and the number of items that you find not only are going to be increasing in the number of issues that you find, but in some cases, the relative severity. It's a showstopper if something wasn't done on the vehicle, and now we're past the point where it was an item that you wanted and we just can't accommodate that. As compared to something where you maybe worked diligently on the rocker switch arrangement that you wanted in the cab or at the pump handle for the auxiliary lighting, and then come to find out, well, maybe the engineer didn't pick up on that, didn't look at it, so he set it up, and now the switching needs to be changed. Okay, that's relatively minor. But if you then, find out that what your expectations were in terms of, I guess, a critical dimension, overall height or height, loaded height of the hose bed from the ground to the bottom of the hose bed or bottom of the cross lays if you run cross lay attack lines, and then you find out, well, it got off by 2 or 3 inches, and they'll say, well, if you read the fine print, Chief, here on the bottom it says plus or minus 2. Well, in this case, it was plus 2. That's the best we can do. That's something of a showstopper. So all of those things, you need to go in that and again, not be adversarial, but have your salesperson polite, tuned up ahead of time as to what your hot buttons are. And if you got 4 or 5 people on a committee, what's a hot button to Nick Wilbur might not be a hot button for Tom Shand, and vice versa. So somebody needs to mediate that, and say, we're not here. I wasn't expecting to get, a $85,000 custom showroom paint job. It is a fire truck. All right. But there are departments out there that are, the parade departments, that they expect that thing not to have any imperfection anywhere. With the number of units, much to my chagrin, where people go to the blacked out, and we're Line-Xing everything. I've had people, go up into the hose bed and looking to see if there's runs in the Line-X on on the hose bed dividers. Hey, I'm sorry, if you were foolish enough to line X your hose bed dividers, I want to be the salesperson selling you your attack line and your supply line hose, all right? Because you're going to be replacing that stuff. But literally, I mean, what's important to you, all right? And for the committee chairperson or for somebody that's really level-headed or might be, somebody that's maybe within the same generation as the salesperson, to say, hey, here's a couple of things that are really, really important to us. So when we get there, we're going to be looking at that stuff early on and make sure that we're on point. And hopefully those things are good. And then the smaller things, they can get taken care of, and it's nobody's stressing out. But you can see a lot of, particularly in the larger manufacturers, if there's multiple inspections going on, even you say, what describes a final inspection? If we lined up, 3 or 4 of our best friends with different fire departments, and you said, how do you do your final inspection? There's just as many ways to bake the cake as there is to do a final inspection.
Yeah, a couple things on that, and it goes back to kind of relationship. And, if something's wrong, somebody's going to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for that change. It depends on, it might be you, if it's a change that you want to make that wasn't in the in the spec to begin with. Again, like you talked about, we get out there and say, hey, this isn't really working for us. We need to do this. Well, all right, we can do it. There's other things, like I went out one time and we were doing a final inspection, and all of the compartment lights were white, except we opened the wheel well compartment up and it's red. Well, what's wrong with this? So hey, salesman, come here. What's up with this? I don't know. He goes, I must have messed up. So we go, we look, we're in the spec, or, they must have messed up and just put the wrong lights in. Maybe they didn't have any. They just put the red ones in until they can get the white ones. Okay. Well, we go, look, we messed up. It was in the spec the whole time. We missed that one compartment that have red lights in it. That's on us. We're going to pay for it. But again, that relationship with your salesman, hey guys, I got this. This is, I should have called it. It's my fault. I got it. That's not going to happen every time. So, again, you want to build those relationships. And even if you're buying a fire truck every 20 years, you can have, your dealer, your salesman to your company banquet, to a picnic that you're having. You can have that relationship with them to kind of, foster that friendship. The other thing, too, though, is people do mess up, and it goes in favor sometimes one way or the other. One of the first jobs I did for EVR was because the frame rails on this fire truck were supposed to be painted. And guess what? It came to the final inspection and they got a picture of it, and they weren't painted. So back and forth, they negotiated, but again, they were unsure of what else they were going to find. So they called us to come help with the inspection, but they negotiated a fix for that. Now they're not going to take the fire truck apart and repaint the frame rail. So, again, hey, we'll do underbody coating for the next 5 or 6 years or whatever, but that's a negotiation. Also, same thing. One time we went out for a ladder truck for my fire company here, and we have compartments above the side stack ladders. Well, one of the guys got a tape measure out. Well, this is the wrong size compartment. Okay. What are you going to do? Are you going to rip the whole side of the fire truck apart to fix that? I mean, it's like a 1/4 inch off, and he's having a big deal about it. That's one of the things that you just gotta, okay, hey, there's nothing, we're not going to fix this. We'll kind of hold that in our pocket. If something else comes up, we can do that. And, same thing, at work, we went out there the other day. We were out there for a final inspection for another couple pieces of apparatus. We watched them pin the ladder on our new ladder truck. And then we go back to doing our other things, and they come back over and they say, hey, listen, they noticed, the engineering noticed that the paint colors are not the same on your fire truck. We really need you to come look at this. So we go, we look at it. You can tell they're not the same, but it's not that bad. And again, it comes back to, what are you going to do? Are you going to make them take the ladder all the way apart, or are you going to put that in your back pocket and use that to fix something else down the road? So
exactly.
There's give and take, on that, how are we going to fix this thing? There's a little bit of give and take on all of that. And you got to be able to, again, it's a negotiation all the way through the process, but everything costs money. And you want to make sure that you have yourself covered because you put it in a boilerplate that this is, hey, if there's an issue between the specification, that whatever the fire department said is what, wins out, and whatever, this manufacturer said is, second. So, again, it's all how that is written in that boilerplate. And that's where it really becomes super important, is to write that stuff down 3-4 years before you're out there looking at it. So, and the other thing, and this kind of backtracks a little bit, but we talked about change orders. Fire trucks are built on change orders, and you really need to make sure that you stay up to date on change orders, and that you cross-reference the change orders with the actual spec and make sure that they're in there. Some manufacturers like to go through the change orders individually. They'll start with it and say, hey, we're going to go through every line on this change order and make sure that it's right. Some other ones would just capture them within the component list or however they go through the spec. But again, you have to have that conversation, and don't forget that what's in the spec that you might have could be different based on a change order that you put in.
Exactly. Yep.
I think one thing too, besides money that you talked about with all the, the final inspection stuff, is time. You're off by a quarter inch. That's great. You say, hey, you got to fix it. They might pay for it, but what you're going to lose is time. They're going to be, that fire truck would be out for 6 more months. And if you think they're going to do a good job or put that to the top of the list, you are sorely mistaken, because now there's no room for it. The assembly line is a one-way street. It doesn't go back the other way. Like, there's all the space behind you is taken up already. So everything is going forward. And that's like, back to your point of going back to the dealership for warranty work. There's no room behind you there. That thing's forward progress, and it's onward and upward. So, I think that's a huge point. And then just having that pot of money at final inspection too, if there is a mistake on either end. I feel like a lot of people, when they spec their fire truck, they're tapping out that budget to $0 by the time they hit pre-engineering. And now with that long lead time, you want to make sure there's some dollars left over at final inspection to cover some of the costs, for sure. But yeah, that's been, we're about an hour here. I think we covered a lot of ground there. We could talk probably for another 3 or 4 hours between stories and other parts of the final inspection. We're definitely going to revisit this. I think between midpoint inspections, pre-engineering, there's a whole lot more to talk about here. So definitely stay tuned in for more episodes on these topics. Appreciate you guys spending time with us today. If there's any closing remarks from Tom or Win, sneak them in now before we before we have to take off.
No, just a great topic, Nick, and I think definitely need to consider another part or two-way of this. A lot of other great information, and hopefully the old expression, educated consumers are best customer. So you need to develop that attitude all along the purchasing process.
Hey, I think I'll throw this in. If you, were interested in this and learning more on final inspections, Tom and I are doing a class at the FDSOA conference in January. So, look that up, the Fire Department Safety Officers Association. We're doing a class on final inspections. So, like we said, this kind of barely scratched the surface. There was a whole lot more that I think we wanted to talk about. And, we just kind of got digging into it because it's not as simple as go out there, look at the paint, see what's wrong with it. There's a whole lot more to this final inspection. And, again, this is probably one of the most important things, most expensive things, in today's age that your fire department will pay for. So you want to make sure that this is done right. And a majority of us are going to keep this thing for 15 to 20 years. So again, this is one of the most important parts of the apparatus build is the final inspection.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom, for coming on. Appreciate you coming out to this episode. Definitely huge wealth of knowledge that we love tapping into, and we'll definitely tap into again. Thank you all for tuning in. If you like what you're hearing, look at Fire Apparatus and Equipment podcast. We have some more out there under the Apparatus Workshop, and some that we've done before we were named. So check those out. If you have any ideas, topics, feedback, have any questions that we talked about that you want more information on or need help, reach out. Nick Wilbur at evr.solutions. Again, thanks again for tuning in, and be safe out there.
Thanks.
In the world of firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. That's why for over 2 decades, first responders nationwide have trusted the Fire Store as their go-to source for essential equipment, apparel, and accessories. Visit thefirestore.com online or in-store